It's like a way that we can do things in a way that are more aligned with our natural energy, our talents, who we're here to be, so that we can be more productive, more abundant, more self-expressed without pushing ourselves, without creating burnout in our lives, without wearing ourselves thin, and without playing by the rules, the old school, old paradigm rules, you might say, right? It's a very useful tool for anybody who's interested in working smarter, not harder.
Hello, and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast dedicated to exploring the journey of authenticity in the workplace and discovering how to navigate it your way. I'm your host, Sandhya Sudhakar, and this episode is part of a series called Tools to Work Your Way. Now, in this series, I'm introducing you to my favorite tools, the ones that have really shaped my own personal and professional growth the most and helped me show up more authentically in my own career so that I can work my way. We'll cover some more corporate assessment tools and some tools that are not typically used in the workplace. Now, these tools aren't about defining who you are, but instead about helping you uncover insights about yourself, what you're great at, how you best operate, all so that you can show up more intentionally in work and in life. So for each of these episodes, I'm bringing on a co-host, someone who's just as passionate about the tool that we're exploring as I am. And whether it's a fellow coach that I've trained with or a friend that I've swapped endless voice notes with about this particular system or framework, we'll dive into our own personal insights, and we're going to talk about how you can use these tools to spark your own journey of self-discovery and growth and use them to work your way. So let's get started. Okay, so before we jump into the episode with my guest, I want to just say a couple of things here. So my guest, Jess Parvin, is a holistic business coach, and she does a lot of things: coaching, branding, design, really working with purpose-driven female entrepreneurs to build businesses that are aligned with the lifestyle that they want to lead and the purpose that they want to have in the world. And so regardless of whether or not you are an entrepreneur, I think you're going to find a lot of insight from this episode. But before we jump in case you want to go pull your human design chart, which is what this episode is all about, check out the show notes. We'll have a link there to get your chart, and you can use that to follow along in the episode. All right, here's Jess. All right, Jess, welcome to Working Your Way. I'm excited to have you on.
Thanks, Sandhya. It's so good to be here, and always great to have a deep, interesting conversation with you.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure we're going to talk about all the things. This is obviously another episode in this series of tools to work your way. And, you know, we're going to talk about human design today. And it only showed up like later. I was going to talk about all these leadership tools and these like data-based assessments that are used in the corporate world. And I've got episodes on some of those, but I was talking actually to Sean, the copywriter for the episodes, and he does all the editing and he knows me really well. And I don't know, it just came up in that conversation where I was like, I also really love things like astrology and human design. And like, why wouldn't I not talk about those things and share those tools with people? So I'm super excited. I have you as our expert on human design and me as someone who just really loves it and has used it to find a lot of insight in my life. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, what a great series and a great way to blend something like human design, which we'll talk about more about what that is. I think human design in general is a great blending of all of these tools and sort of ancient wisdoms. But yeah, what a great idea to blend that with the also more, strategy-based tools that we all need as well, like AI and systems and organizational tools. Those are great too.
Yeah. So if somebody who has no background whatsoever comes up to you and says, I've heard of this thing called human design, what is it? How do you describe it?
Yeah, well, I definitely describe it as a tool, first and foremost, a tool for understanding ourselves better and specifically understanding our energy in the world. Human design was created by this man. We can talk more about the inception of it, but it's really a really elegant blending, I think, of all of these other tools. So it brings in astrology. If you're familiar with astrology, we'll definitely recognize some aspects of human design. It brings in the I Ching from China. It brings in the chakra system from Indian tradition, as well as quantum physics. So there is like a scientific basis for it, I think. I think it's a really good blend of, I guess you could say, spiritual and scientific information. So yeah, again, it helps us understand our energy, how we are sort of meant to be in the world, how we're meant to manifest, create things. And because of this, I think it's really a helpful tool for people in their work and career. I work with entrepreneurs mostly, so I find it super helpful for us to understand, what our work might look like in a perfect scenario when it's totally aligned with our energy and sort of our purpose in the world. But really, everybody can benefit from it in so many ways.
Yeah, I think for me, as I was thinking about what are the things I learned from human design, why has it been a valuable
Oh,
tool for me? So much of it was about there's a way that I'm designed to operate in the world. This isn't about saying like you can only do XYZ, but it's like your energy is best spent. You're going to get more out of what you put out into the world or what you put into a creation if you do it in a way that's aligned with how your energy naturally flows. And it is this idea of, and I think about this with like Enneagram and a lot of other tools. It's like we're not all designed to work the same way, to be the same way, to use our energy the same way, to operate the same way. And this is just one of those tools that can give us permission to say, when it seems like everybody is running in this direction, I can actually run in the other direction and I'm going to be fine.
yeah, it's actually, when you say it like that, it reminds me of that term productivity hack, which sounds very masculine, but it is a productivity hack. It's like a way that we can, do things in a way that are more aligned with our natural energy, our talents, who we're here to be, so that we can be more productive, more abundant, more self-expressed with less effort, with less of that hustle, with less of that push. And I think there's so much conversation right now about being productive, being expansive, abundant, creating, businesses or manifesting whatever you want in the world without getting into that hustle culture that so many of us have become familiar with, right? Without pushing ourselves, without creating burnout in our lives, without wearing ourselves thin, and without playing by the rules, the old school, old paradigm rules, you might say, right? That we're kind of putting people in a box, putting businesses and the way we do things in the business world in a box. So I think it's a very useful tool for anybody who's interested in working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, it truly is so funny that you say that. It is a productivity hack by going against what most productivity hacks would tell you in most cases, right? It's like it's actually the way to find the one that would work for you. And so
and it's so customized. Everybody's unique.
It's a complex tool. There's a lot of layers and a lot of things you can get out of it. But before we get into kind of some of the big elements of it, how did you find your way into human design? How did you discover it, or where did you hear about it, or how did you come to start using it?
I think I first heard about it, I want to say 2018, maybe, definitely pre-pandemic. I was in a coaching container. I was working with a business coach who was using human design and talking about it. So she kind of taught us the basics and how to use it in building our businesses, which is so much of how I use it now. So I kind of, went down the rabbit hole on my own and learned about it and studied it for my personal benefit, right? To understand my energy type and strategy and authority and some of the basics. So really for a long time, I've been using those kind of in the background. But then 2 years ago, I did a certification. I became a certified soul purpose coach to sort of add to my toolbox as a business coach. And human design was part of that curriculum. So it was a reminder to me about how useful it can be in a personal growth setting, but also in a business setting. Because again, we were kind of using it for our own benefit as we were building our businesses as coaches. So I guess about 2 years ago, I started to incorporate it more into the work I do with clients. And now it's really the jumping off point for all of my coaching with entrepreneurs. I love to look at their charts and have those conversations with them right off the bat and see what really resonates with them so that we can I feel like for me as a coach, it allows me to like jump into the conversation with them like 5 steps ahead, right? Like I could have several coaching calls with them to get all this information and to start to understand like their energy and their purpose and their gifts and how they best tap into their intuition. But when I look at their chart, I kind of have all that information right away, and it's 100% of the time resonates with them. So for me, yes, it's such a game changer as a coach to have that tool to work with clients.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, kind of came up in my head as you were talking about that is like it can just give us language to describe things that maybe we kind of knew, or there are default ways of operating, but haven't always named or like been able to lean into because we kind of just thought it was like there in the background or we didn't even realize it. And so I love it as that kind of tool as well. For me, I was actually traveling. It was during my sabbatical that I was in Mexico City with some girlfriends. This was 2019. And we had all been at a retreat together that summer and just bonded at this retreat. And like that was one of the catalysts to me like leaving my job and leaving a relationship and going on my sabbatical and like all of that kind of stuff. And so it was like that summer was really important. That retreat was really important. And then when we all just met up in Mexico City and San Miguel de Allende and did some traveling together, which is really fun. And on on a van ride somewhere, I remember one of my friends was like, "Have you heard of this thing called human design?" So like most great things we hear about them from our girlfriends first. And so me being the like super curious, and I had a lot of time at that point, right? I was like just like living my life doing whatever and diving into tools that were really interesting to me. And so I started learning about it and I started being like, wow, that's so interesting and that's really helpful and gives me this permission to operate in ways that I thought I wasn't supposed to do. And from there, it was the rabbit hole situation. So
I love that. I feel like this is one of those tools that comes to us, in perfect timing, of course. Like, and it's so often when we're at a pivotal point in our lives and there's changes happening, something like a sabbatical, like thinking about quitting your job. For me with clients, like thinking about launching a new business. I mean, a lot of them are in a similar place to where you were. And it's that like deeper knowing of ourselves that is so valuable at those times in our life. And absolutely a permission slip. I always say that at the very least, people find it very validating. Like even if you're very self-aware and you've done a lot of work, you're going to just get validation by seeing your chart and like, yep, that's who I'm meant to be. This is what I'm meant to do. Got it. It's very validating.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea of permission too, because it's like, I don't think I've ever been someone who needs permission to do something that I want to do, but there's like, we get so many messages all day, every day about like, this is the right way to do it. This is the right way to build a business. This is the right way to have a marketing strategy or to find a job or to, wake up in the morning and like work out first thing and do X, Y, and Z. And this is the right way to live your life. Right. And so I think it just helps to have that rooting in something, in any tool, and a tool that kind of gives us that validation, like you said, to be like, actually, I'm going to keep doing it my way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. As with every tool like this, right? It's like take from it what resonates with you.
Yes.
What's going to help you and leave the rest. But absolutely. Permission to be you.
Yeah. And on that note, probably you could study human design for decades and still be learning more. And so what do you think are the most important, what are a couple of the first things that people learn about themselves from the tool, or what do you think are the most important places to start?
Yeah, if you're totally new to human design, you're probably going to, so you can grab your chart and it'll look like the human body with all of these energy centers, they're called. They're like shapes. And if you're familiar with the chakra system at all, you'll notice that they correspond loosely to the chakra system. There's one in our head, our third eye, our throat, and so forth. So I think learning about the energy centers is really, really important. It's not necessarily the first thing most people do, but I think it's one of the most important parts of human design. But the way that your energy centers are configured are going to tell us what your energy type is. And that's usually the first thing people know. It's kind of like knowing your sun sign in astrology. It's really important. Everything else kind of filters through that lens, but it's not the only thing. It's not the only important thing. But it does tell us a lot about generally how our energy is meant to be in the world. So that's usually the first thing people know. And then I would say strategy and authority after that, which are more of like our day-to-day, it's like our compass of like how to take action on a daily basis, and tap into our intuition.
Yeah. And so are you a manifesting generator?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are as well, right?
I'm a generator.
Generator. Okay.
A regular generator.
Regular. It's like, really just say regular. Nobody's regular, but yeah.
No,
okay, so.
yeah. And so what that means to me being a generator is I am designed to do the things that my energy naturally flows to, and things that light me up, things that spark my interest, things that I feel like passionate about. If I put my energy into those things, I'm going to like produce what I need to produce in the world. And on the flip side of that, if I'm doing things that feel like unimportant to me or mundane or even against my kind of natural value system or whatever it is that like it's almost like this virtuous cycle. The more I do things that light me up, the more energy I'm going to have, and the more energy I'm going to spill out into the world that like other people can kind of pick up on and harness, and that if I'm living in alignment, which this word will probably come up a lot. Like if I'm doing the things that are right for me, opportunities will come to me. They will show up in my world. And so it's like almost this like attracting, there is, the law of attraction. If I'm putting my good energy out into the world, it will attract the right things.
Yeah. And I imagine that this is probably part of what's felt like a permission slip or very validating to you. And it's such a relief, right? To be like, okay, I don't need to push things into existence. I can just sort of step back and let things come to me. We'll talk more about our strategy in a minute, which is responding for generators. But that idea of like, yes, when I'm in alignment, when I'm following my intuition, my curiosity, my excitement, opportunities are coming to me. And all I have to do is kind of choose which ones to respond to and how to respond to them. Right, that's got to be really validating.
Yeah, because I also think like in some of the like profile stuff comes up in this room, but like I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit. But like it can feel very self-indulgent to be like, I'm only going to do the things that I'm really passionate about, which is actually like really kind of a messed up thing in the first place, to like be like, if you follow your passions, you're being self-indulgent, right? But I think there is this kind of like weird attitude in the world of focusing on yourself is like a negative thing, which is like, whatever. And so the idea though, that if I am doing the things that I love and that I'm passionate about, that actually like it spills out into the world of like other people can actually feed off of that energy. They can get their own permission from that energy. I'm also probably creating things that are helping people. And so like, in a way, like focusing on myself can be a service to others. Like that's the like shift and the permission there that is, I think, hard to find sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, we should all be operating from that place, right? It's that idea of like giving from a place of overflow is how I always think about it, right? Filling our own cup first so that we're more valuable to everybody else. But you touched on a point I wanted to make, again, when introducing people to human design, what I always say is like, it's a beautiful tool for differentiating who we're meant to be and how we are designed to be. Again, similar to astrology, if you're familiar, with conditioning, how we've been conditioned to be. And I think as I'm working with people and talking to them about their human design and going through their chart, anything that right away doesn't resonate with them, I like to go in deeper and talk about that, because it's always a conditioning issue, right? They'll be like, oh, that doesn't seem like me. And then I'll be like, is it? But okay, so let's think about, why it doesn't feel like you. And is that a belief you picked up, right? Like I have to work hard or I have no value in the world, versus responding and letting opportunities come to me. Yeah, of course, a lot of us have been conditioned to think that that's selfish or that's lazy or whatever, just because of the culture or the family we grew up in. But human design really is a great way to enter that conversation around how we've been conditioned and to look at that through a totally different lens, which is really healing. I think.
What do you take away from your energy type? Or what are some of the other ones that aren't generator?
Yeah, well, I'm a manifesting generator. So, technically I'm still a generator. Generators, both mani-gens and generators, we make up 70% of the population. So most people are a generator, which means we're creating things in the world. We're meant to follow what lights us up. We're providing energy for everybody else in a sense. And we have this sacral battery, as we call it, that's continually like creating energy as we do what lights us up. So a manifesting generator just is slightly different from a generator in that we have a defined throat energy center connected to a, what do they say, like a battery, a energy center that provides this sort of current of energy to our throat, which means that we're manifesting faster and sometimes like with multiple things at the same time. I feel like generators are better at like following through, not necessarily with only one thing at a time, but more focused on one thing at a time and can see it through to completion. Mani-gens, and this has definitely been my experience, we like to have lots of things going on at the same time. And maybe we're not so great at following through and seeing all of those things to completion, right? I'm great at starting projects, and the validation there, or the permission for me, has been enormous, because you can imagine, having that kind of energy growing up, starting, being in a career, starting a business, being in college. Like, there's so many times when it's just not, it's, seen as flaky or inconsistent to be starting a lot of things, to be juggling a lot of balls at the same time, to have different interests and passions. And for me, I realize now that like that's really part of who I am and what I'm here to do. So I embrace that for sure in my life and in my business. I always have a few different projects going on. I like working with a variety of clients, and I've really embraced that in my branding as far as who I work with also, because I think I'm attracting women or entrepreneurs who are multi-passionate, who, like me, want to have a lot of different things going on in their business. They don't want to just focus on one project or one type of client. So I really invite them to bring that multi-passionate energy into their brand, whether they're a manifesting generator or not. I think a lot of us have that energy, but mani-gens just have maybe more of the ability to sustain it long term than other people who might just be exhausted. If they looked at my schedule, they'd be like, are you freaking crazy? I'm exhausted just talking to you.
It is all kind of relative too, right? Because I think somebody could look at my business and be like, yeah, you have a lot of things going on. But like, to me, it all fits very nicely and neatly under this umbrella of like working with Enneagram, like understanding yourself, like the podcast about working your way. Like, yes, there are multiple elements, but like it's all nicely wrapped up in a bow, neat and tidy. And I can channel like all of my energy into these couple of ways that I'm doing this one thing. And like, to me, that actually feels great. And the idea of like, if I were doing all these disparate things that weren't serving the same people, I think I would feel like really overwhelmed by that.
Yeah, overwhelmed and confused are definitely common words that I hear come up with my clients and for myself. And so, yeah, there's always that balance. And I think knowing our energy types helps us understand how to balance our energy. So even though I'm meant to do a lot of different things, and I have that multi-passionate energy and this like ability to juggle a lot of things at the same time, I also really need to balance that. And again, we'll talk more about aspects of our chart, maybe like our profile. But I see lots of places in my chart that tell me I need to have alone time to really recharge and regroup and think about all my projects and, get clear on where I want to put my energy. Because just like regular generators, mani-gens, we also just need to follow what lights us up, right? I don't want to put my energy into things that I'm not excited about or aren't, leading to my greater purpose.
Yeah, I could see that being something where it's like once a quarter or twice a year or something. It's like, oh, I've started all these things. Now let me sit down and like figure out like what I still feel drawn to and like cut some of those things out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I'm constantly checking in with.
Yeah, and alone and with your own thoughts, right? Like not with a bunch of other people giving you opinions. And so the other energy types, just to kind of like give the context, can you speak a little bit to like how are those different than generators and manifesting generators?
Yeah, there are three other energy types, and actually they're technically non-energy types because, like we said, the generators of the world kind of provide the energy for everybody else. So I think for these three energy types, it is more important, it's somewhat more important to be around sort of the right people in an environment that's providing you good energy and not, kind of zapping your energy. But let's start with manifestors. So manifestors are about 10% of the population. And I said I'm a manifesting generator. So I have this sort of hybrid nature. So I can see parts of myself in manifestors and certainly in generators. But manifestors are like the only energy type that are really here to create from their own sort of internal knowing. Like if they have an idea, it doesn't have to come from anywhere. They're not responding to anything. They're just initiating from their own intuition. So really powerful energy. They sometimes say that the aura of a manifestor is repelling. It can kind of be intimidating, I think, to people. Martha Stewart is a famous manifestor that comes to mind, who you can imagine is very powerful, right? She's just in her lifetime has just created everything that she's ever wanted to create and found people to help her carry it through. Again, manifestors aren't great at finishing projects, but they're absolutely great at starting them and being the ideas people, the initiators. But yeah, she's also, maybe you could say, has a repelling aura and definitely rubs people the wrong way because she's a strong manifestor woman, especially. I would say that's probably a tricky position to be in. And then the other two energy types, projectors and reflectors. I work with a lot of projectors. They're about 20% of the population. I feel like projectors often find themselves heading towards entrepreneurship, especially like as healers, guides, coaches, therapists. They're great at helping other people really feel seen. And they're also really great at like organizing and improving systems, society in general, groups. So people who are really tuned in to like the energy of others.
One of the things that I think is really interesting that I've learned about projectors is like they are kind of these like wise seers. They're the advisors. They're the person that can kind of like sort out things for people or help people see things. And they have all this wisdom, and what can happen in my experience with like friends that are projectors is like the strategy, I think, right, is to like be invited. And so if your wisdom is invited into a room, that is where it's really well spent.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then you're going to be like a person who's trying to tell people like, I see this thing, you should do this or go this way or don't work on this. And it's not being listened to. And so that like invalidation of that can feel really draining.
Yeah.
And so like my understanding is it's like most important for projectors to find a place where they feel invited in. Otherwise, they can burn out really easily.
Yeah, that rest and recharge is really important for them. Again, they don't have the sacral battery that generators have. And I always hear from projectors, how validating, again, and seen they feel when they understand their human design, when they understand what it means to be a projector, because they've probably been, they've been living in a generator world. 70% of us are generators. We're producers, right? We're energy beings. We're creating things and sometimes, moving quite quickly. And projectors are just not like that. They're more thoughtful. They're a little bit slower in a way, like they just don't have the energy. Like they could work, again, smarter, not harder. They can work like 3 hours a day probably and get done as much as most of us would do in 8 or 9 hours. And yet they find themselves in jobs often, right, in corporate America or whatever in the world, where they're supposed to be on call all day, or they're supposed to put in 8 hours of work, or they're supposed to be on their feet for many, many hours. And they just get really, drained and depleted. And then there's that bitterness element. Bitterness is the not self theme for projectors, which means when they're out of alignment, when they are not being invited to share their wisdom, or when they're trying to sort of push or project their wisdom onto other people, they're going to feel bitter and like they're not being seen, not being heard. And that can be really exhausting and frustrating. So really difficult sometimes to be a projector in a typical, quote unquote, typical work environment in this world.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then, so the last energy type is reflectors, and they are very rare, 1%. I've only met one that I know of. Do you know any reflectors? Have you met anyone?
Think one, maybe also.
One of the women in my coaching certification one of the women running it was a reflector. So That was useful to hear her experience. But reflectors are completely open energetically. So if you're looking at your human design chart and you're seeing those energy centers, those shapes that sort of correspond with the chakra system, you'll see that they're either defined, which means they're colored in, or they're open, which means they're white. Reflectors have all open energy centers. So that means they're just taking in and amplifying energy from everybody around them. So you can imagine, again, like you said, it's so important to be in the right space with the right people, people that give you energy, that light you up, that fuel your creativity, that see your wisdom and value, because they're literally reflecting back to the rest of us what's working and not working. So incredibly valuable in communities at large, but incredibly difficult, I can imagine, on a daily basis to be so, you could say, empathetic, or, people who are just really in tune with other people's energy. That's a reflector in a nutshell.
Would you say, this could be like completely wrong, but would you say like it's harder for a reflector to like have a strong sense of self because they're so in relationship to everything going on around them?
I would imagine. I mean, again, I wish I knew more reflectors and could talk about this. I would love to have a client reflector to work through some things with. But yeah, I can imagine that's a huge part of it, right? Because they're so influenced by their environment. So again, pulling apart the conditioning from who they are would be very interesting and helpful for a reflector, because they could probably see, if, for example, if a reflector has worked in multiple different jobs or different environments or lived in different cities, they probably see themselves changing drastically from situation to situation. They're kind of chameleon-like that way, right? Which is not good or bad. All of this exists on a spectrum. Like, it's very convenient sometimes to be that adaptable, but it's also, really tiring. And sometimes it just pulls you further and further away from who you know yourself to be and who you want to be in this life. So yeah, I imagine that's a huge challenge of reflectors.
And so what's the strategy for a reflector?
It's to wait the full lunar cycle to make any decisions or to take action. So that's their strategy and authority in a nutshell. Yeah, reflectors, so like they are influenced so much by their environment and absorbing all of our energy, they're also so impacted by the celestial energy, you could say, the phases of the moon, the tides, right? So every day in the lunar cycle is a little bit different for them. They might experience, the phases of the moon more intensely than most of us. And so their strategy and authority is to wait that 28-day cycle before they take action on something, which again, you can imagine is just really inconvenient in this world that we live in.
Exactly. It's like, but the deliverable is due on Tuesdays.
Try telling your boss, I need 28 days.
I need a full lunar cycle before I can give you that PowerPoint.
Yeah.
That would be, yeah. So, okay, so we talked about the energy types. We talked about the strategy. We maybe made some nods to authority, and I think we'll link some resources to your podcast for those things. But I kind of want to shift gears a little bit just to hear, like, the whole point of kind of these tools and learning about ourselves is so that we can work our way, so that we can do things in a way that works for us and recognize environments or processes that don't work for us. And so I want to hear a little bit more about, like, what are some of the things that you've learned or things that you do in your own business that are based on insights from your chart? And I'm happy to share some of mine too.
Well, like I said, as a Manny Gen, I mean, I embrace, my multi-passionate nature. And the strategy of the manifesting generator is actually kind of two-part, because we have the manifestor energy and the generator. So primarily we are responding like generators. So I'm also trying to be always aware of what opportunities are coming into my sphere. What can I kind of step back, and again, like being that receiving energy of like what's coming to me, what conversations am I having that are sparking an idea or something I want to spend more time, thinking about, what opportunities are coming to me, instead of trying like force things to happen. That's been a big theme for me, like trying to push things out into the world versus responding to what people are asking for, or what opportunities come my way. But then I also have the secondary part of my strategy, which is to inform. So similar to the manifestor. And I feel like all manifesting generators in a sense want to be manifestors, because we want to push our ideas out into the world, right? We want to initiate, but we kind of need to be acting out of response. So that's a tricky thing to balance. But the informing is really important. And that's something I'm always working on. Social media is great for this, my email list, like just telling people what I'm up to as often as possible so they don't get confused. Again, I have a lot of things going on generally, so I have to always be telling people like what's coming next, why it's part of my business, sort of like you said, like it feels really cohesive to you, right? And my business feels really cohesive to me, but I could see from an outside perspective, people are like, okay, you're doing human design and coaching and leading a retreat and yada, yada, yada. It's like,
and doing branding for the restaurant, local, new place. Like,
branding, websites, it like feels kind of like all over the place. So I have to constantly be, and this is where branding, which is, my background and in a sense, sort of the glue of my business, why branding is so important for me is like constantly checking in with my messaging, my visuals, my, the look and feel of my business, my website. Like, am I bringing that cohesiveness to all the things I do? And am I informing people about what's coming down the pipeline? Am I informing people about like what's next or why this is important or, how these things fit together? That's been a big part of, I'd say a big lesson I'm learning.
I think, some of the things I mentioned about like being okay with like going to where my energy flows or what is exciting to me is like probably the biggest one, right? And then the profile, which, we're not going to go through all of them, but again, we can link some resources to this. It's kind of like your personality and the way you operate in the world a little bit. And so for me, that has been really interesting because I'm a 1-3, which the 1 is really about being an expert and learning and like diving into things that interest me and like building this expertise and this body of knowledge about them. And the 3 is about going out into the world and just doing stuff and failing and learning from failure and having this really like embodied wisdom because like I know it because I've done it. I've been there. I tried that thing. Like I integrated the learning for myself and now I'm here to tell you about it.
Yeah.
And so the combination of those two things is really interesting for me because one, it's given me, again, the permission to like buy all the books and read all the things and take all the courses and the like maybe shadow side, if you want to call it that, of like this nature of like wanting to always learn more is like asking myself like when do I know enough and I need to just go out and live this thing. I need to go out and share it with clients or I need to go out and like try it in my own life and like learn from it that way. And so like not getting so into I don't know enough, like I do know enough. And now I just need to go out with this knowledge into the world. But then also like being kind of having that validation to be like, yeah, I am here to share my lived experience with people. Like that is helpful to people. And if I can like share it in a way that I can kind of translate, this isn't part of the profile, but like this is something else that I've kind of learned through like storytelling or things like that is like, if I can translate my lived experience to people in a way that is like, can be universally like understood, then like I got it. Like that's the thing I'm supposed to do, right? And so that's like something I work on in my keynotes and things like that too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, those do kind of feel conflictory sometimes, those two profile numbers, and yet the balance and the way that you're integrating both of them is really beautiful. I feel like the profile, I mean, yeah, we probably don't have time to talk about all of them, but it's these two numbers that are like archetypes. And I feel like they're possibly the most, or one of the most useful tools in human design for working I would say specifically for marketing. From my standpoint, I always talk about with my clients about, how we can create aligned marketing opportunities for them or marketing plans, and looking at our profile lines, I think is really helpful. Like knowing that research is important to you, learning, deep diving into topics, and then sharing that with people through experience. So, you can think about maybe how that might play out in how you market your business or just how you position yourself, in your branding, in your business.
Yeah. What's yours?
Mine's a 6-2. So the 6 is a really interesting line that has 3 stages. And the first stage is kind of like the 3. So I can resonate with some of that. Lived experience is really important, and a little bit of like trial and error, learning from failure. Generally for a 6, that's like the first third of our life. So when I look, again, very validating, when I look back at my 20s and I think of all the crazy shit that I tried, all the different things I did for work and the different places I lived and relationships I was in, I was like, okay, that was definitely my experimentation phase, learning through experience and learning through failure phase. And, it wasn't for naught at the time. It might have seemed like I was flaky, or we have all these stories through conditioning. But in retrospect, I see that that phase was really important for me to learn these life lessons, to then integrate. I'm kind of at that middle phase now where I'm still like integrating and constructing my vision. And then, very close to stepping into the third phase, which they say starts around age 50, where you are like a guide, a role model. 6 is called the role model. So really stepping into that phase of life, but balancing that. So the role model obviously feels very externally focused. I mean, just using that word, it feels like a very extroverted thing, right? Like I'm supposed to be kind of teaching and guiding other people. But then my other number is the 2, which is traditionally called the hermit. Not crazy about that name, but it's really just it's about having natural talents, but also like needing to cultivate those natural talents. And I would say process things and grow as an individual through alone time. So again, that's one of those places in my chart where I see that like alone time is really valuable for me. I've taken some solo trips in the last few years. I try to at home, like have, I call them artist dates from the Artist's Way book, where I take myself out for the evening and do things just to like sort of be in my own head space, do something creative, nurture my curiosity and creativity. That's a big part of being a 2.
Yeah. And so maybe this is something you're still cultivating, but like, how do you know the difference? How do you know when you need that solo time and when you're in like service mode, maybe?
Yeah, just like everything, it's kind of a balance, and I don't always have the time or wherewithal to delineate things the way I would like. Like I have a really busy week booked, and yet the hermit part of me is calling and wants some alone time. So I think for me, it's planning ahead and building in those time periods, and I think that for me is a way to sense when I'm moving towards burnout, right? All of us have the capability of burning out, of wearing ourselves thin, of becoming physically, mentally, and spiritually exhausted by doing things kind of in the wrong way, I would say, the way that's not aligned with our energy. And so for me, it's like when I feel the burnout coming, it's usually because I'm being too externally focused. I'm putting too much pressure on that role model side, and I'm not nurturing the hermit side. And so then I, sometimes there's more of a dramatic leap into alone time. I mean, earlier this year, I went to India by myself for like 2 months. That was kind of a like dramatic hermit thing to do. It's just like, I wasn't totally alone, but for a lot of it I was.
Yeah.
I was just like, I think I came to a point where I was like, yeah, no, I just really need like a long period of integration and reflection and alone time. So, but usually it's much smaller little chunks of time that I can build into my schedule.
Yeah, that was a big one, a big reset.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I think has been really helpful for me, and maybe this is like less about the permission giving and more about the like, ooh, I can lean into these things, is like the channels in human design tell us kind of what our natural strengths are.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I have connects like the mind or the ajna chakra to the throat chakra. And so I have what's called an open head center or an open crown center, which is like lots of ideas come to me all the time. And then they get kind of like conceptualized, but not all of them. It's like only some of them are really meant for me, and others I can just like share with others or just ignore, let them fly away. But this like idea of like conceptualizing things and then speaking them out is like this 1156. It's like the storytelling channel. Yeah. I think it's also called curiosity sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's interesting because I'm like, oh, actually, and even just now I'm sitting here thinking about it and I'm like, That is so much of what I do in like the core episodes of the podcast. It's like I'm talking to somebody, I'm interviewing them about their career. And then I take a step back and kind of conceptualize what we just talked about for the listener.
Mm.
And and so it's like speaking about these things that I have kind of like gathered and collected, right? It's not just like sharing ideas, but it's like something a
Yeah.
little more specific than that, which I think is really interesting. And this idea of storytelling, I just did an episode on it recently about how you use it in work and things like that. But it's always been kind of this like confusing thing, this concept to me that I'm like, what is it really? You know?
Mm.
And then it's so funny because now I take a step back and I'm like, oh, I'm doing that. You know, just
Yeah.
even it's part of the reason that I started a podcast because I'm like, I do love stories. I love people's stories and I love being in conversation with them about those stories. And so,
Mm.
that's something that has been really cool.
I think that's really common in lots of areas of our charts, probably the channels and the gates, especially, where we don't see that we have a natural talent at something because it feels so natural to us, right? Or it's just an integrated part of how we think or what we do, right? Like for you, storytelling and conceptualizing things maybe just comes so naturally that you don't need to like think about how to integrate it more into your work. It's just happening naturally. That's funny. I have the other channel that connects the ajna to the throat, the channel of acceptance, which is kind of similar. It's about being organized, organizing concepts, and speaking about them. But yeah, the channels for anybody listening who's not super familiar, but maybe is looking at your chart, those are the lines that connect our energy centers. And well, specifically, they're connecting your gates. So there are 64 gates, which really correspond to the I Ching, which I'm not super familiar with. But they're like 64 gifts, and each of us have a certain number of them defined. So when you look at your defined gates, those can be, again, very validating or clarifying as to like what specific sort of gifts or superpowers you have that are meant to be expressed in the world. And then the channels connect two of those defined gates, which can be really like an amplified superpower, I feel like. And those, again, from a working standpoint, I feel like after you understand your profile lines, I think the channels are maybe the most interesting for, you know, how to be more in alignment in your work.
Yeah. I think that's, and this is something that I probably didn't really understand until like a little bit down the road of understanding human design is like it's just a system of like circuitry and like certain centers are connected to other centers and those are like constantly working. And then when we can be in collaboration with other people, it can actually like make connections inside of us and light up different things inside of us, which I think is really cool. And that's another thing that like for me has been really helpful is that my like definition, this is like, I've got all these centers that are connected, but then there are a lot that aren't. And so when I can be working with someone who kind of complements my chart or like has things that I don't have, things flow in a different way. And so I have this kind of collaborative style. And so what that means for me is like, if I feel stuck on something, all I have to do is like find an entrepreneur friend and like talk it out with them. And I have like all the clarity that I need, or I can complete the cycle of this idea or what I want to go do with it. And I think for a long time, I just sat in front of my computer being like, I need to, build this page on my website and I need the words to make sense and like for it to come across to other people in the way that I want it to. And I would like struggle so much. And then it's like, oh, if I just call up somebody and like talk it out with them, oftentimes I can get over that stuckness like right away. It doesn't even take that much, right? So it's like, it's funny too to be like, how can I operate in a way? How can I recognize where I don't need to keep pushing this thing? I just need to like change my environment or like talk to someone or whatever.
Yeah. I spend so much, generally my work is with solopreneurs, I'm doing a lot of readings for people as individuals, but I'm so interested in working with groups, maybe companies, small businesses, and looking at human design, the human design of the group. And yes, exactly. How can we, who can we lean on for certain things? How can we sort of connect the circuitry so that we see what the superpower of the group is, or maybe a pair, And, also knowing everybody's energy types and strategy and authority and other things can be so valuable, so that you are hopefully, I think in a perfect world, we're all doing the work that we're meant to do, right? The generators are creating, the manifestors are the ideas people, the reflectors or the projectors are improving systems and guiding people. The reflectors are showing us what's not working. And if we could bring this work, and I'm sure other people are doing this, but I would love to as well, bringing this into those group environments. I think that could be really so helpful for people to, streamline the way that they do business.
Yeah, I love that. And it just it goes back to that place that we started, that it's there's a role for each one of us in this collective. And if we all play our role, we can come together and create these things, right? And I think it's similar to how I think about Enneagram. It's the problem is we try to get everyone to play the same role or operate the same way. And that's where people aren't able to shine. And if we can let them play their role and operate their way in a team, in a collective, in a company, then that's where we get, we actually benefit from the differences, right?
I just did a podcast episode about the concept of the new paradigm in human design, which is this era that we're entering into. They talk about 2027 specifically, but I think it's basically already here. We're seeing these massive shifts. And again, if you're following astrology, it's very similar to the age of Aquarius and all the huge astrological changes happening right now. But it's this idea that, we're shifting into this new era where the individual is empowered to be in alignment with their unique purpose, to focus on their self-expression, which again feels a little selfish, right? Because we're coming from this more collective focused energy where it was about sacrificing for the good of the group, right? The company, the country, the world, the community, whatever you're a part of, the family. And so that mindset, I think, is shifting, and that energy is shifting in the world. And human design, I think, has come to us at this time, not surprisingly, to help individuals identify what how they're meant to operate in this world and what their individual gifts and purpose are, so that we can, all benefit. So again, it's this giving from a place of overflow. If we're all working in alignment with our energy, if we're all feeling fulfilled and self-expressed and we're doing what we're meant to do, then amazing things are possible collectively. It's just a different way of thinking than we've been conditioned to believe.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think that's a great note for us to kind of wrap up on. And we'll link some episodes in the show notes for your podcast to learn more about the basics. We didn't cover all of the profiles and all of the different authorities, but there's so much that folks can learn. And anything specific that you want to mention in terms of what you think a good next step would be, or a couple of the resources that you want to share?
If you're interested in learning more, of course, I do one-on-one readings, so you can find that information on my website. You can pull your chart for free on my website at jessparvin.com/freebies. The freebies page on my website has a place to enter your birth data. So just like in astrology, you need to know the time of birth, ideally. The closer you are to the minute of your birth, the better. But even if you're not super, super specific, you can still, a lot of the chart will be the same. So sometimes I do readings with people who don't exactly know their birth time, and we just pull several charts and kind of figure it out that way. So so you could start there, pull your chart. I have some workshops around human design for free on my website, and then contact me for a reading if you want to go deeper.
Cool. All right. And then we'll have some podcast episodes about the places that you can start to learn about what is in your chart once you pull it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for this invitation, Sandhya. As always, it was wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah. Thank you for being on and giving me a good reason and conversation to reflect on some of the things that I've learned in my own career.
Yeah, likewise.
All right. Thanks, Jess.